The fight that brought them closer, why one argument saved their love. The morning after the argument that nearly shattered everything between Shu Kai and Tan Songyun felt surreal. The kind of morning where even the sun rose a little slower, as if hesitant to interrupt the fragile peace settling over the home they had once feared might collapse again. Inside the nursery, the air was still, filled only with the quiet melody of a soft lullaby playing from a music box beside the crib. Tan Songyun stood over their newborn daughter, adjusting the edges of the tiny pink blanket with delicate fingers that trembled slightly from both exhaustion and overwhelming emotion. Her eyes were swollen but steady. The storm had passed, but its aftershocks still pulsed quietly beneath her skin. Shu Kai stood behind her, watching. The image of her cradling their daughter, Songyun, in the early morning light, was one he would carry in his heart forever. There was something different in her now. Something deeper than before. She had always been strong, but now she carried a different kind of strength, the strength that comes after nearly losing something you can never afford to lose. He stepped closer without a word. Tan looked up, their eyes meeting across the soft glow of the room. There were no apologies spoken, because none were needed anymore. The night before had stripped them bare. They had shouted, broken down, walked away, and come back. And now, standing together over the child they had created in the middle of chaos, they simply chose peace. She reached out and took his hand. They stood there, side by side, not speaking, just breathing, as if afraid to disturb the fragile thread stitching their hearts back together. Returning home from the hospital should have felt victorious, but instead it felt humbling. The kind of moment where reality fully sinks in. The silence in the car was comforting. Shu Kai drove with one hand on the wheel and the other gently holding Tan's. Every now and then, she would glance back at Songyun sleeping in her car seat, her tiny chest rising and falling rhythmically. Each breath was a small miracle. Each movement a reminder that their story had not only survived, but had now brought forth new life. That night, nothing went according to plan. Songyun cried endlessly. Bottles were prepared wrong. Diapers took multiple tries. The lullaby failed to work. Shu Kai spent hours pacing the living room with her in his arms, singing every tune he remembered from childhood. Tan tried to rest, but every sound made her sit up in panic. At one point, both parents stood over the crib at 3 a.m, tired, confused, and emotional. Tan leaned into his chest and whispered, "I don't know if I can do this." He wrapped his arms around her and whispered back, "You already are." Those words carried them through the longest night of their lives. A week later, the photo that broke the internet appeared. It was a private moment, captured unintentionally by Tan in the early hours of the morning. Shu Kai had fallen asleep on the nursery floor, cradling Songyun on his chest, a bottle still resting in his hand. The expression on his face was pure contentment. She posted the photo to her private account, just for close friends and family. But somehow, it leaked. Within hours, the image had spread across social media like wildfire. Fans called it the most tender fatherhood photo they had ever seen. Comments poured in. Some were heartfelt, others invasive. And with the praise came the poison. Shortly after the photo went viral, a former brand partner accused Tan Songyun of violating a prior contract. The headlines turned sharp. Was the reunion staged? Was the pregnancy hidden on purpose? Were they manipulating public sympathy? Questions no one should have to answer were suddenly plastered across every entertainment page. Once again, Tan found herself at the center of judgment, misunderstood and misrepresented. One evening, as she sat in the rocking chair feeding Songyun, she scrolled through the comments. One in particular stopped her heart. Why does she get to pretend she's perfect? She stared at the screen for what felt like eternity. Her eyes welled up with tears, but she refused to let them fall. Shu Kai walked in a moment later and found her motionless, phone in hand, lips pressed tightly together. He didn't need to ask. He turned off her phone, set it aside, and knelt in front of her. "You're not perfect," he whispered. "You're better than perfect. You're real." Later that night, he stayed up writing something. He couldn't fix the world, but he could leave something lasting for the one person who mattered most. He wrote a letter to his daughter, tucked it gently into her baby book, and sealed it with a kiss. "Dear Songyun, When you grow up and see photos of us, you might think we had it all figured out. But we didn't. We were scared, exhausted, uncertain. We fought. We forgave. You were born into love that had been tested, stretched, bruised. But you were also born into love that refused to die. If you ever wonder what love looks like, remember this: it looks like your mother holding me after I failed her. It looks like two people who kept choosing each other, even when it was hard. Love, Baba. The backlash didn't stop overnight, but something shifted after Tan made her next move. She posted a video, simple, unfiltered, and quietly powerful. In it, she was holding Songyun, rocking gently and singing a soft lullaby. Her voice cracked slightly. Her eyes were tired. But she was glowing. The caption read, "I never claimed to be perfect. Just present." The internet was silent for a moment. And then came the waves of love. Real love. The kind that understands silence. The kind that doesn't demand explanation. Then came a phone call that neither of them expected. Shu Kai's past had come knocking. The voice on the line belonged to the woman he had briefly dated during his and Tan's separation. She said she wanted closure. He didn't tell Tan at first. He thought it would hurt her. He thought it didn't matter. But secrets never protect. They only delay pain. Tan found out through the press. A gossip outlet reported the meeting before it even happened. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply looked at him with quiet disappointment. "Why didn't you tell me?" He couldn't answer. Not in a way that would make sense. That night, they sat outside on the porch, the city humming softly beneath their feet. "You don't need to erase your past," she said. "I just need to know I won't be surprised by it." He reached for her hand and placed it over his chest. "I'll never lie again. Even when I'm scared." Their anniversary came and almost passed without celebration. They had both been too drained to think about dinners or surprises. Shu Kai cancelled everything he had planned. But Tan had her own quiet idea. That evening, she asked him to take her for a walk. Just a simple walk. They returned to the rooftop of the first apartment they had shared, the place where their love had begun before the world ever knew their names. She had decorated it with soft lights, candles, and old photos of their early days. They sat on a blanket with takeout food and whispered memories under the stars. "Happy anniversary," she said. He smiled, eyes wet. "I almost forgot how we used to be." "Then let's remember," she whispered. Parenthood had changed them, but it hadn't erased who they were. In between the crying and the midnight feedings, they found themselves again. The silence in their apartment was no longer cold. It no longer echoed with words spoken in anger or footsteps storming down the hallway. After that long and painful night, something between them had broken, yes, but something else had been rebuilt. Slowly, breath by breath, glance by glance, Shu Kai and Tan Songyun were learning how to love again. Not the way they did before. This love was different. Deeper. More fragile. But also more true. Morning sunlight spilled across the edge of their living room floor, and Shu Kai stood by the window holding a cup of tea that had already gone cold. His eyes drifted toward the hallway, where Tan was still sleeping. Or at least, he hoped she was sleeping. She hadn't said much since their reconciliation the day before. Her body was still tense. Her movements still slow. But she was here. That was all that mattered. He turned back to the crib they had assembled just days before. It sat quietly in the corner of the nursery, empty but expectant, like it too was waiting for something. For the crying that had not yet started. For the tiny hands that had not yet held their fingers. For the beginning of a life they had almost ruined before it ever had a chance to arrive. He ran a hand down his face and sighed. The fight had left bruises on both of them, invisible but aching. It had pulled up old wounds they never knew still existed. It had exposed fears neither had wanted to admit. But when it was all said and done, when the yelling turned to sobbing and the anger gave way to silence, they had chosen the same thing. Each other. Tan stirred sometime afternoon, the sound of plates clinking waking her gently from sleep. Her hand instinctively went to her stomach. She closed her eyes and whispered good morning to the little life inside her. The baby kicked lightly, and she smiled through tears. "You deserve a better version of us," she whispered. When she stepped into the kitchen, Shu Kai looked up immediately. His expression was softer than she remembered. Tired, yes, but calm. She stood there for a moment, unsure if she should say anything. Then she walked to the table and sat down. He placed a plate in front of her. Fresh fruit. Toast. Nothing fancy, but it meant everything. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded. "You slept well?" she asked. "Not really," he admitted. "I kept watching you breathe. Just to make sure you were still here." Her eyes glistened. "I almost wasn't." That sentence hung in the air, sharp and honest. He reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm glad you stayed. I'm not proud of what happened. But I want to learn how to make sure it never happens again." They didn't rush the conversation. They didn't try to erase what had happened. Instead, they sat in the silence, together, letting the weight of everything soften between them. Days passed and routines returned. They went to appointments together. Bought baby clothes in secret, avoiding malls and choosing small stores where no one would recognize them. They laughed again, though cautiously. Smiles returned, not forced, but gentle. She would catch him looking at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. And he would sometimes find her crying over a children's book, hormones colliding with emotion. But it wasn't awkward anymore. It was real. One evening, Tan sat on the balcony wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the city lights. Shu Kai brought her warm milk and sat beside her. "I read somewhere," she said, "that most couples break during pregnancy." He raised a brow. "We're not most couples." "No, we're not," she agreed. "We're more dramatic." He chuckled. "That we are." There was something healing about admitting how hard it all was. They had spent too much time pretending, keeping smiles for the cameras, nodding politely through gossip, ignoring the cracks that were slowly splitting them apart. But now, there were no more cameras. No more curated captions. Just two people learning how to be real with each other again. One night, Shu Kai surprised her with something small but unforgettable. He had gone into the nursery alone, pulled out a small notebook, and began writing letters to their unborn child. One for each month. Tan found it when she was organizing baby supplies. She read the first entry and cried for hours. "Dear little one. Today your mother smiled at me while stirring soup and I knew in that moment that I would die for her happiness. I'm not perfect. I'm scared out of my mind. But I will be here. Every day. Waiting to meet you. Waiting to be better. Love, Baba." Tan couldn't speak when she showed him the notebook. She simply hugged him tighter than she had in weeks and whispered thank you against his chest. They began writing in it together, a collection of fears and dreams they would one day hand over to their child as a reminder of what it took to become a family. Just as they were finding their peace again, the media came knocking. A photo surfaced of Tan leaving a clinic alone. Headlines exploded. "Trouble in Paradise. Shu Kai absent during critical checkup. Are the two silently separating again?" It was ridiculous. But loud. And the noise brought anxiety flooding back into their quiet world. Tan was furious. "I just wanted to check my blood pressure in peace," she snapped. Shu Kai offered to release a statement, but she stopped him. "No. I'm done explaining myself. Let them think what they want." But Shu Kai couldn't sit still. He had made mistakes before, let the public get between them. This time he wanted to fight back. Instead of a statement, he made a move no one expected. He posted a candid photo of them at home, Tan asleep on the couch, his hand resting protectively on her stomach. No caption. No explanation. Just a moment of truth. The internet stopped. Comments poured in. Thousands. Then millions. Support overwhelmed the gossip. Fans flooded their pages with love. People who had never met them cried over a simple photo. It felt like the world was finally rooting for them again. But more importantly, they were rooting for themselves. Still, public love could not solve private pain. One evening, Tan began to feel sharp cramps. Panic set in. Shu Kai rushed her to the hospital. Tests were done. Monitors hooked. Heartbeats checked. Hours passed in fear. When the doctor finally spoke, relief flooded them both. It was just stress. Nothing serious. But it was a warning. Tan held Shu Kai's hand tightly in the hospital bed. We can't keep living like we're afraid of being watched. I'm exhausted. I just want to enjoy this pregnancy. He kissed her forehead. Then let's disappear for a while. And they did. They left the city. No phones. No social media. Just a quiet beach town hours away, where no one cared who they were. They walked barefoot along the shore. Picked seashells. Watched sunsets. Laughed over burned toast and argued about the right way to fold baby clothes. It was the happiest they had been in months. One night, as waves crashed softly outside their window, Shu Kai played a song on his phone and pulled her to her feet. "Dance with me," he whispered. She laughed. "We're not in a movie." "No."